Welcome to another deep dive today. Today's topic is kind of interesting. We're going to be looking at what the Bible actually says about vegetarianism.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So the source material for this deep dive is an article called God Ordered Living Beings to be Vegetarians in the Bible. And I think you might be surprised by some of the arguments it makes.
Interesting.
Yeah. So you ready to jump in?
Absolutely. Let's dive in.
Okay. So I think the first place we got to start is Genesis. Right? Like Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, that kind of stuff. Pretty familiar territory. But this article points out something I never really thought about before.
Okay.
So Genesis 1.2930 talks about God giving plants as food for like all living beings, including humans.
Right.
Doesn't that suggest that the world was originally totally plant-based?
It definitely paints that picture, at least initially. And the article argues that this original state might imply that God actually prefers that humans live in harmony with nature in that way. Makes you wonder what happened later on, right?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. But okay, even if we accept that starting point, what about that whole idea of dominion over animals?
Right.
Doesn't that give humans the right to eat meat?
Well, that's where things get a little complicated.
Yeah.
The article goes straight to Genesis 1.26, and it argues that this idea of dominion doesn't automatically mean the right to just eat animals. They're suggesting like a more nuanced interpretation,
Okay.
like stewardship, caring for and protecting animals,
Yeah.
instead of ruling over them and just eating them all the time.
So less like a king at a feast and more like a shepherd taking care of their flock.
Exactly, yeah. And they point to Psalm 147.9 to back this up.
Okay.
It says that God directly provides food for the animals.
Yeah.
Which means humans aren't the source of their sustenance.
Yeah.
We just have a responsibility to make sure that all creatures are cared for.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's definitely a different perspective than I'm used to hearing. But let's be real here. There are verses that seem to allow meat eating, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The article doesn't shy away from that at all. They specifically address Genesis 9.3,
Okay.
which seems to say that it's okay to eat animals after the flood.
Right. It sounds pretty straightforward.
Right on the surface it does.
Huh.
But then the article throws in kind of a curveball,
What's that?
Genesis 9.4. Right after it seems to give permission to eat animals, it prohibits eating blood.
Oh.
It's a detail that's often skipped over.
Yeah.
But it creates this kind of tension,
Right.
these limits,
Yeah.
even within this newfound permission to eat animals.
So you can eat the animal but not the blood. What's the point of that?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? Some scholars think this is a reminder of the sanctity of life,
Yeah.
even when you're taking it for food.
Yeah.
It's not just indulging your cravings. It's
Yeah.
acknowledging that consuming another creature is a serious thing.
Almost like a ritual to remind us of our responsibility.
Exactly.
Yeah. Interesting. So even when it seems like permission is granted, there are still ethical boundaries.
Right. And speaking of ethics, the article then tackles a big one, animal sacrifices in the Old Testament. A lot of people point to those as proof that meat eating was not only okay, but encouraged.
Right. Because if they were sacrificing them, they must have been eating them too. But the article doesn't agree, does it?
Nope, not at all. They go right to Isaiah 1.11,
Okay.
where God says he doesn't like sacrifices.
Oh.
The focus is on mercy, not ritual killing. It's not about pleasing God by killing animals. It's about acting justly and being compassionate.
So the animal itself wasn't really the point of the sacrifice. It was more about what it symbolized.
Right. It really challenges how we usually think about those sacrifices.
Mm-hmm.
The article's argument is that true worship is about aligning your actions with God's desire for mercy and kindness, not just rituals.
Okay, I'm seeing a theme here. It's not just about what you eat, but the why behind it.
Exactly. And that leads us to a pretty interesting figure in the Bible, Daniel.
Oh yeah, the guy who went totally vegetarian and thrived.
Yeah, the article definitely presents him as a champion of that lifestyle. They highlight the story in Daniel 1 where he refuses to eat the king's food, which probably included meat, and chooses a plant-based diet instead.
And it says in Daniel 1.15 that he actually looked healthier than all the meat eaters after only 10 days.
That's a pretty powerful detail. The article uses this story to suggest that a plant-based diet isn't just healthy. It might even have God's favor.
Wow. So we've got this peaceful plant eating beginning in Genesis, a call for responsible dominion over animals, a focus on mercy over sacrifice, and now Daniel rocking the vegetarian life.
Yeah.
It's really making me rethink what I thought the Bible said about all this.
And it gets even more interesting when the article brings up Jesus.
And that's where we'll pick up in part 2.
It's going to be fascinating to see how it all ties together. Until then, keep thinking about it.
Yeah, keep those wheels turning. Welcome back to our deep dive into what the Bible has to say about vegetarianism.
Yeah, we've been exploring some pretty thought-provoking stuff.
Right. From the Garden of Eden to Daniel, it's a lot to think about.
And it gets even more interesting as we move into the New Testament.
Okay, so what about Jesus? Did he ever actually say anything about eating meat?
Well, that's the thing. There aren't any direct quotes from Jesus specifically about meat.
Huh. So it's kind of a mystery then.
Yeah, it's open to interpretation. Some scholars say that his silence means he was okay with what people were doing at the time.
Which included eating meat.
Exactly. But others say that Jesus' emphasis on compassion and loving all beings suggests that he might have preferred a more plant-based approach.
It's like we're trying to solve a puzzle, but some of the pieces are missing.
Yeah. We have to look at the bigger picture, his overall message.
Right, okay. So what does the article say about all this?
Well, it highlights a passage in Romans that's pretty relevant.
Which one?
Romans 14.2021.
And what does that say?
It talks about not causing others to stumble through our choices, especially when it comes to food.
So even if you think something's okay, you should think about how it might affect other people.
Exactly. The article says this has a lot to do with how we think about vegetarianism and veganism today.
It's amazing how these ancient texts can still be relevant to modern issues.
It really shows how powerful these ideas are. The article suggests that what we choose to eat has consequences that go way beyond just ourselves. It affects animals, the environment, and even other people.
So it's not just about what you like. It's about recognizing that everything is connected.
Right. It's about this idea of generosity, thinking about everyone and everything, not just yourself.
That's a powerful message for sure. And it connects with everything else we've been talking about. Responsible dominion, mercy, the example of Daniel.
It seems like it all points to a way of living that's more in line with how God originally wanted creation to be.
A world where everyone and everything is treated with respect and compassion.
Exactly. And that's what makes this topic so fascinating. It's not just about what's on our plates. It's about our connection to God, to each other, and to the world around us.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
Yeah, some really complex arguments and interpretations.
And it seems like there's not one easy answer.
That's what's so great about it. It keeps us asking questions and trying to understand these important issues.
As we move into the last part of our deep dive, think about what stood out to you so far.
What challenges your assumptions? What new insights have you gained?
We'll be right back to wrap things up and leave you with one final thought-provoking question. Welcome back. It's been quite the journey through the Bible, exploring all these different ideas about vegetarianism. What's really resonated with you from what we've talked about so far?
You know, I think what's really hit home for me is the shift in perspective that this article encourages. It's not just about finding verses to support eating meat or not eating meat. It's more about grappling with these bigger ideas.
Right.
Like dominion over animals, but in a responsible way, mercy and compassion. The idea that all of creation is connected.
Yeah, it's like we're seeing these familiar stories in a whole new light. I never really thought about the Garden of Eden as like a statement about how humans and animals should relate to each other. But the article really makes you think about it.
Definitely. And then there's Daniel, who flourished on a plant-based diet. It really challenges the assumption that meat is necessary for strength or spiritual purity.
Yeah, and even the verses that seem to give permission to eat meat, like after the flood, they come with this restriction about not consuming blood.
Right. It's not just a free pass. And then you have that powerful message in Romans about how our choices can affect others, which really connected this ancient text to the ethical questions we're wrestling with today.
It makes me think about how my own food choices have these ripple effects, not just on my health, but on animals, the environment, even other people around the world.
That's really the heart of it, I think. This article pushes us to see food as more than just fuel. It's a moral choice, a way of expressing our values and how we relate to the world around us.
So where do we go from here? What are we supposed to do with all these insights?
Well, that's the thing about a deep dive like this. It's not about giving you a simple answer. It's about giving you the knowledge and the questions to figure things out for yourself.
This article definitely gives us a lot to think about. It makes us rethink what we thought the Bible said about food. And it encourages us to consider the deeper meaning behind our choices.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as we wrap up, I think it's worth going back to that image of the Garden of Eden. You know, if, as the article suggests, God originally intended for humans and animals to live together peacefully on a plant-based diet, what does that tell us about how we should treat the natural world? What about our responsibility to care for all living creatures?
That's a powerful question to leave our listeners with. It's not about forcing anyone to eat a certain way. It's about encouraging everyone to think carefully and compassionately about how we interact with all life on this planet.
I think that's a great place to end. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We hope you found it thought-provoking, and maybe even a little bit challenging. Keep thinking about these ideas, and until next time, happy exploring.